Hi, I'm Nidhi Singhai from India Internet section, and I'm going to present my presentation on a comprehensive study of vulnerability in TCP/IP networks. So first we'll cover what are the main TCP features which marks it apart from other protocols. The first is that TCP is a reliable protocol, which means that it waits for ACKs for the segments that have been transmitted by the sender, and if the ACKs are not received, then the sender retransmits the packet, thus ensuring that all the packets have been received by the sender, by the receiver. Second, TCP provides flow control. TCP uses sliding window protocol for maintaining flow control. It maintains a sender transmission window and a receiver transmission window, and both the windows are adjusted to meet the flow between the communicating peers. Thirdly, TCP provides congestion control. So as we know that TCP waits for ACKs for the transmitted packets. So based on the ACKs and the lost ACKs, the TCP analyzes the network and adjusts the transmission windows accordingly. So why do we call TCP as vulnerable? Firstly, because TCP was designed very early in 1980s, to be more precise in 1981. So at that time TCP was meant to be used in defense organizations and for educational institutions. So the communication was expected to be between the trusted parties. But now TCP has found a wider audience and it is the most widely used protocol. Also, the initial design does not handle all the security issues. What are the TCP attacks that we'll talk about? The first is the TCP sequence number attack. Then we'll talk about routing protocol vulnerabilities, TCP congestion attacks, and then lastly forged TCP RST attack. The main challenge in addressing any of these attacks is that any protocol change that we make to TCP should be backward compatible. This is because since TCP has been in existence since quite a while, there are a lot of hosts which run older versions of TCP and which might not be ready to upgrade. So our current protocol enhancements should work with those clients as well. So first we'll talk about TCP sequence number attack. The main attack in this case is that a malicious client can guess the sequence number which is used by the server. This is basically used while establishing a connection. So we can have a client which impersonates as another host and tries to establish a connection with the server. The connection in turn, the server in turn responds with its sequence number. Even though the client does not receive this packet, it can guess what the sequence number might be and start the conversation or the communication with the server and send bogus data. What are the solution for this attack? The first is that we can increment the sequence numbers used by the server randomly. Right now, the sequence numbers are incremented in a predictable fashion. Second, we can have a hash function for creating sequence number space, which will be uniquely identified by a 4-tuple, which is localhost, local port, remote host, and remote port. But this is too much of work for creating a sequence number. And the last one is we use an encryption mechanism like DES for generating secure random numbers. This is the best solution, I would say, and but we need to choose the key very carefully. Usually system reboot times are picked up as the keys, but since they are also easily decipherable by the attackers, we can encrypt the system uptime and use it as the key. The second type of attack that we'll talk about is routing protocol vulnerabilities. We'll talk about a couple of routing protocols and their features here in brief. The first is the IP source route attack. In this attack, this is usually used when we use IP source routes in the packet. So the malicious host can interject the packet and modify the source route by inserting machine's address in the route option. So the result would be that all the packets would traverse through this machine as well, and this machine can either extract information or modify information, so which might be harmful in case of sensitive data. So the solution for this attack is, first we can use a firewall for preventing external network packets into the network. But this can fail when we have a bad network design, such as two internal networks which are being connected to each other by an external backbone. So although this is a very bad design, but there are a few enterprises which use this. Second, we can also add trusted gateways only in the source route. Though this is a good solution, but it's not a practical one. The next type of attack and the next protocol attack would be the RIP attacks that we'll handle. RIP uses UDP for its transmission, but we are covering it here for completeness. Now, RIP packets are broadcasted for route updates. So, firstly, it's not very easy to verify broadcast packets. Thus, we can have attackers which can impersonate a trusted host and send RIP broadcasts, thus affecting the routing tables of other routers if they update based on these broadcasts. The solution for such attack would be to first prevent any route addition to the local networks based on these broadcast messages. Second, we can have ISPs to filter packets which have a bogus IP address. And third, since these are broadcast packets, they would have a wider coverage. So, watchful administrator can notice these broadcast anomalies. The third routing protocol vulnerability that we'll talk about is the BGP attacks. In the papers that was there, we had EGP mentioned, but EGP is a outdated protocol. So that's why in my paper I have mentioned BGP vulnerabilities. So the basic BGP attack would be misconfiguration. So these misconfigurations might be where a prefix has been mistakenly added. So the BGP route updates would carry those prefixes, or we have advertised a prefix with a lower preference value, which would lead all the routers to update their routing tables and point the route to these prefix to this router, which might create a backhole and the router might not be able to handle that much traffic load. The next type of attack is that BGP does not perform any checks against packet modifications due to the below reason. First is it does not check against hop integrity, which means that messages are not altered between the two hops. Second, it does not check against the right of autonomous systems to advertise the prefixes. And the third is it does not do path attributes validation. Since BGP is one of the most widely used protocol, there are currently already solutions which are which are being standardized, and the best solution in this is to use secure BGP. Secure BGP basically has four elements. The first is public key infrastructure, which delegates AS numbers and address spaces, and it does this through certificates. Then second is IPsec protocol, which ensures hop integrity. Third is address attestations, where it defines the right of an AS to advertise prefixes. And then the last is route attestations, where it performs path validations. So it basically authorizes the neighbors to advertise prefixes in update messages. The last routing protocol vulnerability that we'll talk about is ICMP attack. ICMP messages are usually very harmless messages because they're usually probe messages. But there might be a few ICMP messages which can be used for affecting the network. Few are mentioned here, like ICMP redirect, destination unreachable messages, TTL exceeded, or subnet mask reply messages. The solution for this attack is to prevent any network modification based on ICMP messages. We should wait for the routing protocol convergence to happen for any network modifications. While these were very specific solutions to problems, we can have a general solution for all the routing protocol vulnerabilities, because routing protocols usually use source address authentications. So we can use an authentication server to authorize the peer. So this can be for transport level encryptions or link level encryptions, and the authentication will be based on keys. The next type of TCP vulnerability is the TCP congestion attacks. We'll talk about three attacks here: ACK division attack, the duplicate ACK attacks, and optimistic ACK attacks. The first is the ACK division attack, in which for data segment received, the receiver breaks down the acknowledgement into multiple acknowledgements and sends it to the sender. As per the RFC, for each acknowledgement received, the sender increments its transmission window. Thus, these multiple acknowledgements would lead to multiple increments, which is not desired. So the solution for handling such attacks, which is being used by Linux systems, is to increment the transmission window only when the highest segment has been acknowledged, which in our case is 2000. The second congestion attack is a duplicate ACK attack. In this case, the sender, for any data segment received, it sends a series of ACK messages for the same, acknowledging the same data segment. So if they are not, since the sender does not know, so it can keep on incrementing again the transmission window, and which is not desirable. So the solution against this attack is that sender this can be implementable at the this can be implemented at the host level. So the solution would be that the sender would increment its transmission window only for the number of messages that have been transmitted after the missed segment. All the other acts would be ignored, as we can see in this case. The last congestion attack is an optimistic ACK attack. In this case, a receiver can send an ACK for the messages that it expects to receive in future. So while this is not advisable, but we have a few malicious senders, receivers, which might use this technique. So this can lead to an increased to a decreased round trip time, and thus will increment the transmission window manyfold. This can have an adverse effect on a lot of networks. So the solution for this optimistic attack is for the sender to have a way to identify a trusted client. So how we can do is that a sender can intentionally drop one of the segments. So a trusted client, when sees a missed segment, will keep acting for the last received segment, for the last in sequence received segment, while malicious client will still acknowledge that segment, because there would be no way to identify if the segment was dropped in the network or by the sender. So, and the last attack that we talk about is forged TCP/RS reset packets. These packets are mostly used by network administrators to control bulk data transfers like BitTorrents. This attack came into focus because of the recent action taken by Comcast on its P2P clients. The solution for this attack would be to ignore out of sequence reset packets. Second, to ignore the recent reset packets with varied TTL values. And third, there are works going on for developing detectors which can detect and avert these attacks. So these are the various TCP vulnerabilities that we talk about in this paper. Next, I'll talk about my programming project. I've picked up programming assignment 1 and programming assignment 2 as my programming project. So first we'll talk about programming assignment 1, which relates to classical ciphers. So this slide basically defines our input set that we were given. The first is the input set, which contains these characters. Second, the substitution key, which will contain the encryption rule for each character in the input set, and the transposition key, which will be block size long, which in our case is 8 bits. First, we'll talk about the substitution cipher implementation. As part of this, these functions were implemented. The first is get substitution key. It reads the substitution key from the substitution key file and constructs the key array. Second is the encrypt file subcipher. In this function, we read the input file character by character and encrypt it using the substitution key array. Also, the encrypted characters are written to a cipher file. Third is the decrypt file subcipher. This function reads the cipher file character by character and decrypts it using the reverse substitution key, and the decrypted characters are written to a plain text file. The next is the transposition cipher. Transposition cipher uses these functions. First is get transposition key. It reads in the transposition key from the specified key file and generates the corresponding key. Here we assume that the key size would be 8 bits long. 8 bytes long. Next is encrypt file transcipher. In this function reads in the input file block by block and rearranges the characters as per the given transposition key. Now the key function of the transposition key is that the key might be in jumbled form. So how we generate the actual transposition key is we first sort the key, and then after sorting we find the relative position of the original text in the sorted text. So that becomes our transposition key. So the last function that we use is decrypt file transcipher. Here we read the cipher file block by block and decrypt it using the transposition key. Again, now we might have cases where at the end of the file where the block read is not equal to 8 bytes. So in that case we recalculate our transposition key to be equal to the number of bytes read, and then encrypt or decrypt the cipher. The last is the product cipher, which uses substitution and transposition keys. So the first step would be to retrieve these two keys. The second is to the encrypt product function. It reads in the input file, first encrypts it using a substitution key, keeps the cipher in an intermediate file, then re-encrypts the cipher from the intermediate file using the transposition key, and the final encrypted data is written to a final cipher file. Decrypt product performs the reverse function. It takes in the cipher file as the input, first decrypts using the substitution key, stores the decrypted text in an intermediate file, then re-decrypts this intermediate file using the transposition key. The final topic for this assignment is cryptanalysis. So as part of this project, we have implemented cryptanalysis technique only for transposition cipher. We have not used any online tools. Cryptanalysis for substitution is readily available online using hill climbing technique, but as part of this project, it will be done in future releases. In case of analysis of transposition, we assume that the sample word file is provided, and for each word in the sample file, we check every two consecutive blocks for the occurrence of all the characters in the sample word in those two blocks. If they are present, we capture the probable indices of the of the alphabets. So once the relative position, or we should say once the relative distinct position of the alphabets is known, the transposition key is generated and it is used to decrypt the input ciphertext. So this completes our programming assignment 1. This is a sample run for the substitution encryption that was done, and this is the system runtime for various file sizes using the different techniques: substitution encryption, decryption, transposition encryption, decryption, product encryption, decryption, and transposition cryptanalysis. So we have taken file sizes of 1 KB, 2 KB, and 5 KB. The next programming assignment that was taken was RSA crypto system. Now, in this programming assignment, we are assuming that an input text file will be encrypted using RSA. Ideally, RSA is not used for encrypting a complete text file. Usually, files are encrypted using symmetric algorithms like AES, and the key is encrypted using RSA. So, since we don't have means of encrypting a complete file, I have used my methods. I've used my own delimiter to identify the various cipher numbers that will be written to the cipher file. Now, in this case, each encryption will read in 32 characters and convert it into a bit string to get the corresponding message. We'll see all this in the future slides. So the below functions are being implemented for RSA crypto system. The first is get random function. I'm not using the inbuilt random function provided by the GMP library, which I'm using to implement large numbers in this case. So I use srand and rand to generate 16 random numbers, and I concatenate them to form a single random number string. Now, between every two random number generations, I'm introducing an artificial delay of 1 second so that we don't get identical numbers in consecutive runs. The second function implemented is to check prime numbers. I'm using Miller-Rabin method to check for the primality of the random numbers generated. So this function will be called twice to generate two random numbers, two random prime numbers. The third function implemented is GCD, which returns the GCD of two large numbers. Then get encryption key, it finds the encryption key using the fact that GCD of the encryption key and phi of the product of the two prime random numbers is 1. Then the function get decryption key retrieves the decryption key using the fact that ed is equal to 1 mod phi n. For in this case, this function required us to calculate the inverse of the encryption key. So we have written a new subroutine calculate inverse, which calculates the inverse of the number using extended Euclidean method. Then we have encrypt message, which reads in 32 characters and converts them to a bit string, which is then converted to a GMP number. This number is the one which is used for encryption using the encryption key. Then decrypt message reads in the number from the ciphertext. As I said earlier, we are using spaces as the delimiter. So it reads in the cipher numbers and decrypts them using the decryption key. This slide shows the project demo flow. The first we do is we generate keys. So generate keys executable, it generates two prime numbers and writes those keys into files. Here we are writing them to private key and public key .text. Then we call encrypt message. Encrypt message reads in an input file and takes in the public key file as the input and encrypts the message and writes the output in a ciphertext. The last executable is the decrypt message, which takes in the ciphertext and private key as the input and writes the output in the plain text. Now, this is the file which tells us about the different time taken for the different runs of this program execution. So, our input file size is 1 KB, and for 5 different runs, I've captured the time in seconds for key generation, for encryption and decryption. So, this completes the programming assignment. Thank you.